I feel what, first of all, an enterprise need today, that is what our platform as EY we are trying to do for our internal customers is, first of all, they need somewhere to play around with OpenAI, the models, right?
Okay.
So you need some sort of a controlled environment, which is very easy to access. So you need some sort of a self-service kind of an access. So you as a developer, let's say, will be very easily able to go to some sort of a portal, say, guys, I request an OpenAI API key just for playing around. There could be some guardrails that I cannot use client data. Might not have access to all of the latest and greatest models. My company might choose a few models, like, for example, OpenAI, Claude, Llama. So the idea here is we need something like that. That is, I think, the first thing that every enterprise today needs some sort of a way to give this to their developers in a controlled, secured way without having any sort of client data or anything, restrict all of that, but at least still give them the ability to experiment, at least do some simple API calls. That is the first step. Once that first stage is done, then comes the next stage. What is the next stage? The next stage is the ability to do small POCs, proof of concepts, right?
Okay.
Right. So let's say you need to build a knowledge engine for your application, right? So your application might have a lot of documentation, right? So you want to have a very simple chatbot that can refer to that documentation and answer questions.
Okay.
This is a very nice thing that you want to show to your partner or your business, and they would most likely like it. So you need a proof of concept.
Yeah.
But when you want to do this, do you really want to understand, right, which model is better? Right? Do you really have the capacity to, for example, search through all of the models, benchmark them? You don't want to do that, right, as a developer. So think of it as like a development tool, right? So obviously, we as developers, we love the freedom, but at the same time, we love a little bit standardization. Let's say in your enterprise today, they give you 10 developer programming choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know, right? Then you will have to understand, okay, is this better for my use case or not? Rather, it would be better if they standardize on some approaches, right? Similarly, for example, for generative AI, vector databases, right? Which vector database should I use? Should I use Pinecone, Quadrant? Should I use the Mongo? Should I use the Elastic stuff? So we need to give the developers some set of standardization in the generative AI space for a particular enterprise.
Okay.
Just like everything else. So enterprises have standardized on a different tooling, right? They might have standardized on a source control. So let's say in your enterprise, you might have standardized on GitHub as a source control or Bitbucket, right?
Okay.
You are not allowing basically your developers to go and they can theoretically host it on Perforce, but you don't want them, right? You want some standardization, and that's helpful because you don't have to think, right? Should I use Perforce or should I use GitHub?
Okay.
You know, yeah, I have to do GitHub, right? So those kind of recommendations and standard architectural patterns is something a platform needs to give to the developers.
Okay.
So what is the purpose of existence of a platform? If you see the Gartner hype, they have placed the top 10 technological trends for 2023 to 2024. They have placed platform engineering on number 3 or number 4.
Okay.
And they are predicting by 2026, 80% of the big companies will be having some sort of an internal platform of their own. That is what they're predicting formally. Their
Okay.
vice president of research is from. So what does a platform do? Basically, a platform reduces the cognitive load of a developer.
Okay.
As simple as that. The one line in how I explain platform to my consumers. So you as a developer already have to do so much. You have to understand the business context, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to, for example, do the coding. On top of that, if, for example, you also have to think about, okay, which database should I use? How should I consume the database? How should I download that database? It's an additional cognitive load, right? Already we have done a lot of cognitive load on developers. Think when we started our careers, right? We did not have to think about all of this, right? There was no concept of full stack. You used to do some code and good. Now you have to understand the latest JavaScript framework, whether it's React, Angular, Knockout.js, all of that. You have to learn CSS scripting, SQL injection, protect cloud infrastructure, networking, NSGs. Everything is on the developers, right? So the platform engineering tries to make standard approaches, standard templates, so that you as a developer can go to market very easily with the standard templates, and your overall cognitive load reduces. Same is applicable for generative AI. There's a lot of cognitive load today on developers.
Yeah.
If you saw a very recent survey that Salesforce did, so they're saying that 80% or more of developers in the company are using tools which are not approved by the company. Generative AI tools, something like that, even more, I think, even more than 80%.
Okay.
Why? Because the companies have not been able to give very good guidance. You don't know, right, whether am I allowed to use this or I'm not allowed to use it. What should I use? Some companies are saying, no, don't use ChatGPT at all because they will train with our data, right? Someone installing, sorry, you were saying
I was
something.
going to say employees are going to figure out one way or the other to use those platforms and get outputs and use them internally in their organizations.
This used to even happen for normal software, right? Let's say, for example, a company might not allow you to have Notepad plus.
Yeah.
People will just use it because they support some extra tabs and all. Same thing is now also happening in the generative AI space. It's still okay as long as you're not uploading your client data or your enterprise data, but still there are some problems today. So companies need to give good guidance, and what better guidance you can give than having your platform with all of those capabilities, right? So that the developers can simply onboard to them. So that's why I'm saying once your learning phase, your playground phase is done and you need a POC, you need an environment, again, a self-service environment.
Okay.
Ideally, you as a developer should go and say, guys, I need a very simple POC generative AI environment. The platform needs to give you everything that you need. What will you need normally? You will need an OpenAI instance with an OpenAI key. You will need some sort of a vector database of sorts to store your embeddings and stuff. You might need for example, a storage account to store your documents. You might need a data pipeline to get the documents out of the actual data source. Let's say your data source is a Mongo database, get it from there. You might need a web app to show that. You might need some Azure function. So all of these are components you as a developer will need for a standard retrieval augmented generation, RAG pattern, right? Which is the standard pattern today. Also, you will need guidance that should I use RAG pattern or should I fine tune my model? Let's say company might tell you, okay, we have 3 vector database choices. When should you use what?
A reference architecture, if I may.
Exactly, reference architecture basically. And see, what I explain is every company. I know you are part of the enterprise architecture team, right? As part of that team, you might publish reference architectures, right?
That is correct.
Which are an abstraction. You might say that, okay, these are some of the best practices that our company, our developers, engineers should follow. A platform is basically an implementation of the abstraction that is a reference architecture, nothing else.
So you're not limited to just the model diagram which says, hey, this is the decision flow, but then you have to hand over a platform with all the clearly vetted, and all the tools and platforms which are within the guardrails of the organization, and hand it over to this limited set of developers to explore them.
Exactly. There must be security approved, but you don't want to approve Pinecone, right? You don't care. You just need the vector database. You just need to call some APIs. You don't want to ensure that, okay, the vector database I am using, you are very happy. So I have seen developers obviously want freedom, but at the same time, they're more than happy most of the time to follow what the company is asking them to do, as long as the company is giving them some level of a choice and some guidance, right? That is what developers are asking for, right? They're asking for guidance. Which vector database should I use? Should I fine tune my model or should I do a retrieval augmented generation? If I want to fine tune my model, how do I get a GPU instance to fine tune my model? Right? How do I get synthetic data to train my model, for example? So you need a synthetic data generation service. You don't want to go and search which is the approved. So all of these components is something that you should have as a standard pattern in your proof of concept environment, because this will help you, and this needs to be self-service. Right? That is the most important thing. See, Sam Newman, who wrote the book, as you might have seen, Monolith to Microservices or something like that was the name. He's a very well-known thought leader. He has a very nice piece called Building a Habitable Platform. So what is the first essence of a habitable platform is that it cannot be mandatory. Right. So you cannot push your platform on your users saying, guys, no, this is an Intel platform, everybody has to use it. Your platform has to attract the developers so your platform has to be seamless enough so that it makes the life of a developer easier, and then they will 100% choose your platform rather than doing it yourself. That is the art of exactly, and that is the actual art of increasing the adoption of your platform. So once you have this proof of concept kind of an environment, then you need the production grade thing, which is the top, right? So what is the difference essentially? Essentially, the architecture pattern and everything must stay same, but you need to ensure that, for example, all of the InfoSec guardrails are much more enforced. You need to go through some sort of a quality process. Your machine learning model qualities need to be, or the response quality needs to be assessed so that there is no bias, no harmful content, any harmful. Let's say somebody is asking you. So I was just seeing a very nice session by one of OpenAI's